Portland Development Commission. We have actually two items in front of us, both of them action items. Resolution 6899, authorize execution of collective bargaining agreement with AFSCAM, and also action item resolution 6900, which is authorizing one-time lump sum payment and update to PDC personnel policy related to benefit changes for non-represented employees. We'll vote on those separately, but we'll discuss them as one item.
Okay, Chair Andrews, Commissioners, I am Eric Iverson, General Counsel of PDC. I'm very pleased to be joined up here by Julie Cody, Chief Financial Officer, and Eric Jacobson, who is now past President of the Ask Me Union Local. He will introduce our new leadership in a moment. We are all here before you to request your approval of a new 3-year collective bargaining agreement. It was a long time in the making. We have spent many months and many sessions working on many proposals back and forth. The contract was negotiated in the midst of very difficult times. We had, because of declining resources, it was in the midst of 2 rounds of layoffs in terms of revenue forecasts that made some of the economic decisions difficult. But nonetheless, we are here, I think, to celebrate. I mean, I think we've reached a very fair and equitable proposal. I think it's balanced. It provides sound compensation for our employees, although the non-represented aren't included here, but it treats all employees fairly. It's within our budget parameters. And as Eric may mention later, it was overwhelmingly approved by the union yesterday. You all have been briefed in executive session as to the specifics. There is available in hard copy here and online for the public details of the proposal, summaries of the major sections that have been changed, and the agreement itself. So anyone who is interested in seeing the details can either get it online or hard copy. However, before turning the microphone over to Eric Jacobson, I would like to first express my sincere thanks for everyone that worked on this project. Everyone worked sincerely, hard, and diligently on both sides. I know Eric wants to personally introduce the members of his team, but I want to express my appreciation for that team. We had many sessions that were intense, but I never felt that the intensity was based on acrimony. I think there was always on all sides a deep and abiding concern and commitment to the mission of this organization. I'm personally proud to have every one of them as a colleague of mine in this organization, and I think, as you have expressed many times before, I think this board is very lucky to have the level of quality in the membership and employees of this organization. With regards to the management side, I'd like to make a couple of public appreciations. David Barnes, Peter Englander, and Betsy Chase worked for over a year in these negotiations. They worked so many hours, so diligently. I really appreciate their work. Julie Cody was always there in the background and came to the foreground when it was time to look at the economic matters. George Cornett in her department was always available in the background and would brilliantly, I don't know how he did it, but some economic proposal would come forward and he would quickly turn around what the economic impacts might be. There were many people that worked on committees. This is over a year. One of the major things we did accomplish by this, which I mentioned before in executive session, is that we now have mutually agreed job families. A committee of labor and management worked on that process and made recommendations to the negotiating teams. I want to express my appreciation for them, and if I've missed anybody, I apologize if you can think of anyone that I've missed. Linda Andrews, Rob Durkin, Sarah King, Susan Kuhn, David Nemo, Dan Sparrow. Also, I'd like to thank Lisa Abloff, Kate Dean, Jolene Jensen-Clausen, and Aaron Poole for their assistance as well. Finally, I'd like to, in the 11th hour, I would like to particularly thank David Barnes and David Nemo for, in the last week, getting red-line versions of this document into finalized form. It was detail work, but they worked long and hard on it. I really appreciate it. So finally, I'd like to thank Chair Andrews, Patrick Quinton, for at the end coming in and helping with finalizing the last matters that needed to close the gap, and that's what made it happen. So I think it's a solid agreement, and from my stand, I solidly and strongly recommend approval. Eric.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Andrews, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinton. My name is Eric Jacobson, and I've had the pleasure of serving as the president of AFSCME Local 3769 for the past 2 years. And I'm pleased to say that the union membership did ratify in a vote this contract over the past 2 days. And so I really do think it's a good body of work. And I'm proud of the work and the accomplishments we've made together over this past year and a half. Eric did an excellent job of acknowledging a lot of the people who have been involved. I just want to quickly say to the management team, David Barnes, Betsy Chase, Peter Englander, and Eric Iverson, that they did a great job representing the agency, and we're always there, I think, willing to listen. And I think we learned a lot over the past year about each other's interests. I think that's really important, and it's going to be valuable going forward as well. In terms of the union bargaining team, I want to recognize Neil Fitzgerald, Lene Hobson, David Nemo, Julie Rawls, Robert Smith, and Steve Blank, and I think most of them are here today. And these are people who do exceptional work, both here on behalf of the agency and their daily work, and they demonstrated that again with this bargaining team. They were invaluable, and I especially want to recognize Steve Blank. He was the leader of our team, and I think when we all got into this, we thought it was going to be a 6 or 9 month process, and as Eric said, it took a little bit longer for a variety of reasons. And I think Steve especially really kept us together, and that was really important. And then as Eric said, there were some loose ends to tie up over the past couple weeks, and I do want to acknowledge that David Barnes and David Nemo, as well as Eric and Julie, stepped in and really were very positive in addressing those issues. I do want to touch on just a couple lessons learned that we think we've learned, and I think it's going to help us going forward. First is it was a timely process. I think both sides have learned about how to use our time more effectively, and that's something I think we can apply the next go around, because I think we do all have an interest in making this you don't want to rush to a decision. You want to do it right, but at the same time you want to make sure you're using your time well. The other thing we've learned is that the Labor Management Committee can probably step in and be a more effective resource over the next couple of years. That is something that's provided for in the collective bargaining agreement. The Labor Management Committee meets typically once a month, and I think that is a venue to address issues and continue these communications in between bargaining sessions. And the more we can do that, I think the less there are to bargain over every few years. But some of those issues that came out through this bargaining session I just wanted to touch on are, for example, performance evaluations, how they're conducted, how employees have input into managerial performance evaluations, those sorts of things. I think those came up. There's still some concerns, and I think the Labor Management Committee is a place to talk about some of those. We know PDCs as an agency changes periodically its strategies and its focus, and I think it's important to keep in mind how we keep the great employees we have here assigned to those new jobs and duties, and how do we train and retrain people to do slightly different functions, because we have a great set of employees here, and we want to make sure that we continue to retain their skills and talents. And then finally, just as Eric mentioned, we've had some budget issues that have resulted in layoffs, and I think we all have a collective interest in making sure that our resources are applied effectively and efficiently, and that we pay attention to the span of control of managers to employees, and I think that's another thing that perhaps the Labor Management Committee could sort of focus on. It's not something you do once every couple of years. It's something I think we sort of should be taking a look at on an ongoing basis. And then finally, we have had shifts in layoffs and so forth, and that's resulted in workload changes, and I think there are still some concerns from some of the representative staff that although there's been some efforts in a positive way to cut down and prioritize work, there are still some units that are disproportionately impacted by high workloads that had layoff reductions in their units. And I think the last lesson I think we've learned is that the better we communicate both with your bargaining team as well as with the board and with the executive director, I think the better off we are all. And I think we have established more regular meetings, I think, with the executive director, Quinton, which I think are very beneficial. We talked about with Commissioner Moles the possibility of having him serve as a liaison to the Labor Management Committee. I think there's positive reception to that. And then lastly, we met with Chair Andrews recently and discussed the possibility of having periodic meetings with members of the board, either monthly or quarterly or lunches, that sort of thing. And I think that would be very positive because I don't know if you guys realize this, but about 3 out of every 4 employees here at PDC is a represented staff person. And I know you don't necessarily get to see all of them all the time, so I think these sort of informal opportunities to understand the workplace issues would be really positive. So there's a few next steps, things that either didn't get wrapped up in some of the negotiations or still just need to be done. I just wanted to point out a couple of those. First is the hiring of the human resource manager. I know the agency is currently in the midst of that. We see this as a very important hire, and it's important to make sure we select somebody who's been engaged in a union setting previously. We've invited to, Julie has invited the representative staff to have a member sit on that panel to evaluate the applicants, and we really do appreciate that. We've talked about the possibility of now, once this new collective bargaining agreement gets approved, the idea of having some sort of joint training between managers and represented staff. We talked about that with Director Quinton. We think it's a great idea because there's a lot of new information in this, and I think the more we can share what we've learned in the small group setting with the wider audience, the better off we'll be. There's 2 things that we didn't get finished as part of this negotiations that we agreed to sort of put off with a specific timeline attached to them. One is the idea of a unit clarification in terms of figuring out who should be in the bargaining unit and who shouldn't be. I think we've agreed to a timeline that gets us to agreement on that by the end of September. There's a class comp study that's going to evaluate our classifications and our job requirements and duties and the associated pay scales, and we're on track to complete that by the end of this year. And I just wanted to highlight one thing that when we talked about this collective bargaining agreement, I think this is a very positive step. The one thing I just wanted to point out that our members noted that was sort of lacking from this collective bargaining agreement was some way of acknowledging and appreciating the work of our long-term employees who have been here a long time and are perhaps at the top step of their salary range. And I know sometimes it's hard to be concerned about people who are at the top of their salary range, but some of those people aren't necessarily making a lot of money. And they've been here, and I think it's important that the agency figure out ways to recognize their work. It doesn't necessarily need to be financial. It could be through the use of management leave or other techniques, as well as the possibility of providing career path assistance and development opportunities so that regardless of whether they advance here in the agency or elsewhere, that people who've reached the top step of their current position know what their career path is and are being provided with the resources to achieve that. So I just wanted to close by saying I appreciate all the work. I think this is a good body of work. It did take a long time, but I think, as I said, it's better to get it done right than to do it quickly. As I said, I've had the pleasure of serving and representing the representative staff here at PDC for the past 2 years. We recently held elections, and I'm currently vice president. We had a change in leadership, and some of you have met our new co-presidents, but they're Trang Lam and Geraldine Moyle, and they're here in the audience as well. And I know I, as the president, have made many mistakes, and I'm hoping that they learn from mine and represent the employees here better. And I know they're looking forward to working with you in the next year.
I just want to make one clarification or make sure that we're talking about the same thing. Eric mentioned that the class comp study would be done at the end of this calendar year. the job descriptions are going to be done by the end of this calendar year, and the class comp study will be done by, I think, March 2013, prior to, or before, but prior to the next negotiations.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you for your time. I know this has not been an easy job, and the folks up here are all familiar with volunteer that sometimes you don't get the most positive feedback on, so we really appreciate that. I do want to give Trang and Geraldine an opportunity. Would you like to come? Do you have anything to bring today for us today? We're looking forward to working with you. We've had an opportunity to thank our executive team that worked on this in executive session, so I don't need to do that again, but I will, as a group, say thank you very much. We know how much time and effort that you put into it, and also on behalf of the commission, I want to thank the folks on the union side. It takes a lot of time. It's emotional. It's been a difficult year, both world economy, national economy, our revenues getting smaller as districts are expiring, a change in direction, which I think, frankly, is a very positive change with the organization moving towards a true economic development agency focused on jobs versus an agency focused on building buildings, building catalytic projects. So I'm pleased. I know we didn't satisfy everybody, and that's probably a good thing, because if we satisfied everybody on one side, that would probably tell me that we weren't in the middle, and you've got to compromise to be able to make these things happen. So I very, very much appreciate everybody's work, and I look forward to working with you. And I will also reiterate, this board has told me before they're willing to get together with staff. We're busy folks. We can only do it 2 at a time, but let's figure out, what the proper sequence is, what the proper environment is, and let's do it. Let's not just talk about it. Okay. That's all I had. John, thank you so much too for your time and effort in this. You were a big help.
I'd just like to thank both of the Erics that are here that led their 2 respective teams, and to everybody on both of the teams. And I know it was a long, hard effort. I think it took longer than anybody imagined that it would have. But I'm very pleased to hear, and I heard this throughout, that it was done in a respectful fashion, and both sides listened honestly, and were able to move, and that's always good. That's how it's supposed to work. But I would like to, again, thank everybody for the time and effort they put into it. I think not only is it a good, fair agreement for this time and for the times that we're in, but like both of you have said, I think it tees us up to be in a better position for the next go-round. And I think it's important to follow through, like Scott just said, is keep the dialogue open, get the Labor Management Committee up and operating in a good fashion. And I think that will benefit all of us, as we move into the next stage and the next round. So thanks again to everybody. And again, I would like to thank all the employees. I know Chair Andrews sent out an email after the economic development strategy was adopted last week to everybody. And I've said it before in session, there's a lot of folks upstairs that never come down to the table and make a presentation, but I know I and all the other commissioners appreciate all the hard work that everybody at PDC, everybody that works here, we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Oneshka?
I want to also thank everyone that's been working. This has been, of course, my first experience through this process, and I will admit that early on when Eric came, I don't know, a couple of months ago, it was a little surprising to me, the level of, I guess, just anger and kind of emotional feelings that everyone was having, and I could completely understand during that time. It was an extremely difficult time for all of us, and it's so impressive to me that we can be here today and that everyone can say that they've worked together and been respectful with one another and found a way to compromise. And that's exciting to me because I don't see that a lot of times when I open up the paper or look at what's happening on a national level. So that we can do that here, to me, is extremely important. And I thank all of you for putting in the time and the effort to listen and to get through this process, as you said, not quickly but correctly. And I think that's really important. So thank you all for all your work and your efforts. I'm definitely looking forward to having meetings and getting to know more of our staff and hearing how we are doing as we're moving forward. I think that's really important. That was something that maybe we were missing a little bit. So as Chair Andrews said, let's definitely do it and not talk about it. Thanks.
Charles?
Sure. Well, I just want to congratulate everyone. I think the thanks are obvious. Everyone put in a lot of hard work and effort, and it's challenging because we're all under one roof and we're all on one team, and that's the difficult part. You come and you sit up here as a commissioner, and it's almost as if you're listening to two different sides, and we are. Legally we have to, but we're all part of the same team, and that's why it's comforting to know that everyone viewed the negotiating sessions as being very respectful and very professional. And I think that's how we came to this conclusion. When we look at this process from the outside as the public, you look at a situation where you know an organization has limited resources and you have to responsibly and efficiently employ those resources, but at the same time we want to make sure that we are creating and maintaining an environment that motivates our employees and also provides economic returns in the form of compensation and benefits that reward the employees fairly for their valuable contributions. And everything I've heard and seen suggests that we have negotiated to a point that everyone feels good about that. So that's comforting to me. And once again, I want to thank everyone for the effort and congratulate everyone for getting us past this hurdle and establishing some strong and solid foundation for us to move forward effectively and once again respectfully. So thank everyone very much.
Patrick?
Thank you, Chair Andrews. I appreciate the opportunity to express my appreciation as well for all the work that's been done. I obviously stepped into this in the middle of the process, so there are folks here with far more time put in, and I truly do appreciate and understand the toll that it's taken in terms of time and emotion and other things. I certainly agree. I think we've reached a solid agreement. I think it's a fair agreement. I do think, as Eric Jacobson mentioned, others mentioned, we've learned a lot about the process. I've learned a lot about the process, and I certainly am committed to improving the process going forward. I know everyone else is. It's we obviously never want to be hasty in these negotiations, but we can certainly do it more efficiently than we did in the past, and I'm committed certainly on our end to make that happen. And I also am fully committed to the suggestions and proposals that relate to improving the communication and addressing issues that arise before we get to negotiations, so that when we get to negotiations, we don't have a long list of unresolved issues. So I'm fully committed to that, and as I've said privately or in meetings, I am open to any and all suggestions about how we improve the relationship and communications, both in our everyday life as well as during negotiations. So anybody who wants to suggest how we can continue to improve, I'm always happy to have a conversation and talk about it individually or in groups. So, but thanks again for everybody's hard work.
Okay, so I would look for a motion to approve execution of collective bargaining agreement, Resolution 6899.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. And also action item, authorize one-time lump sum payment and update to PDC personnel policy related to benefit changes for non-represented employees, Resolution 6900.
So moved.
Seconded.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Well, can I say one thing, and I meant to say it earlier. The record should reflect, and there were a lot of smiles in the room, that Eric Jacobson suggested he may not have always led the union well, the local, and made some mistakes. I think to a person, that union would say that he was probably as passionate and as informed and as engaged as he possibly could have been. So I wanted to say that on the record. You have represented the union very well. And I look forward to working with Trang and Geraldine going forward, but we should set that record straight. I think your mistakes, if any, were mistakes of passion representing the group that you were engaged to represent. So I want to congratulate you on doing an excellent job. And to the credit of the commission also, I want to recognize Commissioner Molis, because when you look at the activity that comes in front of the commission and you consider the issues that have to be addressed, I think his role was kind of a bridge that wasn't really anticipated but was definitely necessary and helped us get this deal done. And when I look across the table, Commissioner Molis stepped into that role with regard to the union discussions. Chair Andrews stepped into that role with regard to our lease discussion. And Commissioner Dixon has expertise in construction. I'm still trying to figure out my valuable role, but when I look at everyone up here, we have people who are qualified and who step in, and I look out at the staff, and you have passion and expertise, and we bring it all together. And that's really why I love to see something like this end in this way. We're bringing it together so that we can focus on why we're here and we're moving forward. So I wanted to acknowledge you, Eric, and to thank you for your service and acknowledge my fellow commissioners. That's it.
Thank you, Charles. With no other business before us, we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a great day.